I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes, and these will be rapid fire, if I may. I mean, if you need to go into an extended explanation, then do so. On the enforcement of tax laws, the information that I have, you showed $385 billion tax gap in 2006. Do you know what it was in 2016?
It's the equivalent number, the net tax gap's about $406 billion.
Okay. And how about 2015?
Well, they only measure it every once in a while.
Every once in a while?
Yeah. So they don't measure it every year. That's the latest estimate is a net tax gap of over $400 billion.
I saw a number yesterday. Well, the net. Now I'm glad you clarified because the total tax gap was like 456.
That's correct. And then they expect to collect so much. Okay. I gave you the number that compared to the 385.
Yeah. Thank you. And I appreciate the clarification. On the improper payments, that's a big deal with me. I think we've had this conversation before. The 36. The improper payments doesn't account for all the proper payments on Medicaid. You made that. You said it's $36 billion, and then approximately another $60 billion on Medicare.
Right.
On the Medicaid, you said it didn't account for all of it. So
yeah.
Do you have a ballpark?
No, I don't. Unfortunately, I don't.
How about on Medicare? Do you think that represents all the improper payments there?
That estimate's pretty good on Medicare, and now that they're measuring all parts of Medicare, you know.
So we're right at $100 million a year, and this has been going up, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct. It's been going up.
So it hasn't improved. I was informed a few days ago that there may be some indication that not all federal agencies are reporting improper payments.
That's correct. I'm very concerned about that. I pointed that out. There were at least a dozen programs that did not report this past year. One was the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, or the old food stamp program. The Temporary Assistance for Needy Families has never reported. They don't believe that they can do it. I've encouraged Congress to pass legislation that require them to make that effort, and a number of agencies just haven't done it. So the estimates, government-wide estimate of $144 billion for 16 is not a complete estimate. And we've flagged this for a number of years on our government-wide audit, is that the federal government doesn't have reasonable assurance that it knows the full extent of improper payments and can address those issues. 90% of the improper payments, or the last figure, are overpayments. There are some that are underpayments. That's a problem too, because somebody that should be getting a benefit isn't, but most of it are overpayments.
Well, here's the thing that concerns me. I'm also on the Budget Committee, and I've made this point that there are days I feel like my head will explode. We're expending money improperly and not properly funding other programs where we're now obviously deficit spending. So we're literally borrowing money and paying interest on it as a result of improper payments and the failure to fully collect all the taxes.
That's exactly
I mean, you add these two together, and again, to your point that we don't know that this is all that's being expended improperly. Right. We're talking almost $600 billion, and in our 10-year window, that's $6 trillion, and it's going up.
Right.
And we're having to, and we're laying that on future generations plus interest.
Right.
That's maddening.
Yes, it is. I testified before the Senate Finance Committee on this very issue. I'd like to submit my statement for the record, both on the tax gap and improper payments. I mean, it won't solve our long-term and sustainable fiscal path, but it will make a huge contribution if we could get these two areas under control.
I thank you for that, and with that objection. I want to go back to something Ms. Holmes Norton brought up about the revenues from the Bureau of Land Management, and how much is reported that we collected in royalties and revenues?
Yeah, I'll have to, here, I have an answer quick for you. We're rapid fire.
Yeah, we're trying
for oil and gas, it's about
Well, I have the gavel, so we'll be a little flexible.
It's about $10 billion a year for oil and gas.
Okay. There's a number of reports that indicate that the revenues over a 15-year period as a result of repealing the ban on exporting crude oil should increase. But one of the things that I found out, and I want to clarify this, make sure I heard it right, the last that I heard, we hadn't increased the royalty rate since the 1920s. Is that correct, or did that change?
There have been changes since the 1920s. The major law, one of the major laws is from the 1920s. But there hasn't been a huge change in recent years in the royalty rates, both onshore and offshore. But there has been some tweaking.
What is the royalty rate?
It ranges from about 12 to 18%, depending if it's onshore or offshore.
What's the royalty rate that the private sector, private landowners get?
That can range, and we could give you some estimates of that. Obviously, we are only familiar with the federal rules.
On the high end, though, I think it's less than,
Yeah, and
it's
some of
more
this-
than, it's more than what the federal government gets. I
Yeah,
believe.
there's a study that compared federal government to state governments and what they receive as well as the private sector. We can get you a summary of that
Yeah.
study.
I'd appreciate that. Continuing on our rapid fire deal on the improper payments, and I think you may have addressed this, but on the Social Security disability programs, I know we're expending money improperly there as a result of the failure to do the 3-year reviews.
Yeah.
So if we could, I'd like to, if you've got a number on that, you can submit that to us later. I want to ask you something about federal real property, and has there been any estimate for how much could be sold and how much revenue would be generated from that?
There's not an estimate I'm aware of. I'll double check, and if so, I'll submit it.
Well, if you do that, could you also include an estimated savings on maintenance and upkeep?
Okay.
Because that is an annual expenditure that we want to address. I want to ask you another one, and this has to do with, you've made progress in getting these agencies to meet the criteria, and you show that that the benefits, approximately $240 billion, are over that 10-year period, about $24 billion a year. Do you have any idea if what that financial benefit would be to the federal government if all of the agencies met the criteria?
No, I don't have an estimate on that, but most of that money comes from DOD weapon systems that we've been able to curtail. A lot of it's Medicare, Medicaid, and the tax revenue side. So it's all big areas. If we could continue to I think those areas have huge potential. I know it's tens of billions. I mean, I just don't have a complete estimate.
All right. And Mr. Desaulniers, no, it was Mr. Cartwright, I apologize, no mistaken identity here, brought up the issue of climate change. Has the GAO looked into the federal government and the nation's exposure to an EMP event, electromagnetic pulse event?
We have, and I'll submit those reports for the record.
Without objection. And then the last thing, and this is a clarification, when someone was asking about the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and indicated that they have guarantees backing them up that are $200 billion, maybe a little bit more. There was an article in the Washington Post last October that indicated that that guarantee was only about $83 billion. Could someone just check into that and clarify that?
Yeah, we'll clarify for the record, but I'm pretty confident on our number.
Yeah. Well, I just saw that, and I'm not questioning your number. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page on that.
Okay, we'll check what the Post was talking about, and we'll check our number, and then I'll give it for the record.
Okay. Do you have questions? All right. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin.